What conversation with a stranger left you wondering if you'd just talked to something non-human? When I was 19, I was driving cross-country from California to New York by myself. It was around 2 in the morning, somewhere in Nebraska, on this completely empty highway. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and I was getting really tired. I saw a gas station with its lights on and decided to stop for coffee and stretch my legs. When I pulled in, there was only one other car in the parking lot. The gas station looked old, like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. I went inside, and there was this guy standing behind the counter. He was probably in his 30s, wearing a uniform shirt with a name tag that just said, "Employee." He didn't look up when I walked in. I grabbed a coffee and some snacks and went to pay. That's when things got weird. I said hi, and he finally looked at me, but his eyes were strange. They didn't reflect light at all. They were just completely flat and dark. He rang up my items and said, "That'll be $7.43. His voice was normal, but the way he spoke felt off, like he was reading from a script. I paid with a 20, and while he was getting my change, I tried to make small talk. I said, "Quiet night, huh?" He stopped moving completely. He froze mid-action for a solid 3 seconds. Then he turned to me and said, "Do you ever feel like you're not supposed to be somewhere?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Like right now. You're not supposed to be here. None of this is supposed to be here." I laughed nervously and said, "I'm just passing through." He handed me my change and said, with this really blank expression, "Some people pass through, some people stay, and some people were never really here at all." I had no idea what to say, so I just grabbed my stuff and left. As I was walking to my car, I looked back through the window, and he was standing completely still, in the exact same position, just staring at the wall, not moving at all. I got in my car and drove away. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the gas station lights were off, completely dark. I drove for another hour before I stopped again, and when I checked my wallet, the change he gave me was correct. But the bills looked really old, like from the 60s. The serial numbers were faded, and they felt different than normal money. I still have those bills. I've driven that same route a few times since then, and I've never been able to find that gas station again. I work as a bartender in downtown Chicago, and a few years ago I had this interaction that still creeps me out. It was a slow Tuesday night, and this woman came in and sat at the bar. She was probably in her 40s, dressed really nicely, and she had this perfect posture, like unnaturally perfect. I asked her what she wanted to drink. She stared at the bottles behind me for a really long time before finally saying, "I'll have what humans drink when they want to forget." I thought she was just being dramatic, so I laughed and said, "So, whiskey then?" She tilted her head to the side like a bird and said, "Yes, whiskey. That is correct." I poured her a whiskey neat. She picked up the glass and just held it. She didn't drink, she just stared at it. I asked if everything was okay and she said, "I'm practicing." She didn't elaborate, so I said, "Practicing what?" And she said, "Being here, existing in this form. It's more difficult than I expected." At that point, I assumed she was high or having some kind of breakdown, so I kept my distance but stayed nearby. She sat there for maybe 20 minutes holding the glass, occasionally making these tiny movements, flexing her fingers, tilting her head, blinking really slowly, like she was testing her body. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Do you ever forget what you are?" I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Sometimes I forget, and it feels better when I forget. But then I remember, and it's painful." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She put down the glass without drinking any of it and pulled out a $50 bill. The drink was only $8, but before I could give her change, she said, "Keep it." Then she said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for pretending I was normal." She left. I watched her walk toward the door, and the weirdest thing happened. When she got to the glass, she stopped and looked at her reflection for a long time, like she didn't recognize herself. Then she walked out and vanished. I don't mean she walked away. I mean I looked down for 1 second to grab the 50, and when I looked back up, she was gone. Completely gone. The street outside was empty, and there was nowhere she could have disappeared that quickly. I checked the 50, it was real, but it was printed in 1973. I asked my co-workers if they'd seen her, but nobody remembered her coming in at all. When I was in college, I used to take the subway home late at night after my shift at the library. One night, around 11 p.m., I got on a nearly empty train and sat across from this man. He was wearing a suit and tie and holding a briefcase, like he was coming home from work. The train started moving, and he turned to me and said, "Excuse me, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." He said, "What year is it?" I thought he was joking, so I laughed and said, "It's 2015. He looked genuinely confused. He said, "2015? That's not right." I asked, "What do you mean?" He said, "I was just at work. It was 1992. I thought maybe he was drunk, so I asked if he needed help. He said, "I take this train every day, same time, same route. But sometimes the train is different. Sometimes the people are different, and I don't know when I am." I started to feel uncomfortable and was about to move seats when he said, "You're going to exit at the next stop." I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Because that's what you do every night at 11:15. You get off at Webster and walk 4 blocks to your apartment building, the yellow one." I froze, because that was exactly right. I had never seen this man in my life, but he knew my routine perfectly. I said, "How do you know where I live?" He said, "I've seen you do it dozens of times, but you never see me." I said, "Why are you watching me?" And he said, "I'm not watching you. I'm just here. I'm always here. The train is always moving, and I'm always on it. But the years keep changing, and I don't know how to get off." The train pulled into my stop. The doors opened. I stood up to leave, and he said, "Wait, can you tell me something? Do I look real to you?" I didn't answer. I got off the train. As the doors closed, I looked back, and he was gone. The seat where he'd been sitting was completely empty. I reported it, but the staff said there were no cameras in that car, and nobody else had seen him. I changed my route home after that. I used to work night shifts at a 24-hour diner, and we'd get all kinds of strange people coming in. But every Friday at exactly 3 a.m., this one guy would show up. Always the same order, black coffee and a slice of apple pie. Always the same booth in the corner. One night, I was the only server working. It was dead quiet when he came in. I brought him his usual, and he said, "Thank you, but can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, you come in every Friday." He said, "No, I mean, do you remember me from before?" I said, "Before what?" He said, "Before all of this." He gestured around the diner. "I've been coming here for a long time, longer than you've been alive, longer than this building has been here." I laughed and said, "The diner's been here since the 80s. He said, "Yes, but I've been here much longer." I thought he was messing with me. I said, "So how old are you?" He said, "I don't know anymore. I stopped counting after the first few hundred years." I said, "Okay, buddy," and started to walk away. But he gently grabbed my wrist. His grip was cold, not normal cold, ice cold. He said, "I'm not joking. I've been trying to figure out how to leave for a very long time. But every time I try, everything resets, and I'm back here again. Same booth, same coffee, same conversation." I pulled my hand away and said, "You're freaking me out." He said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I just thought, maybe you were different. Maybe you could help me." I asked, "Help you with what?" He said, "Remembering. Because I think I knew you once, before all of this, before I forgot what I was." I stepped back and told him I needed to check something in the kitchen. When I came back out 5 minutes later, he was gone. But his coffee was still steaming, and the pie was untouched. I checked the security footage. It showed him walking in and sitting down, but it never showed him leaving. The last frame was just an empty booth. I never saw him again. I was traveling in Japan a few years ago and took a train to a small rural village I'd read about online. The ride was about 3 hours, and for most of it I was alone. About halfway through, an elderly woman got on and sat across from me. She wore traditional clothing and had her hair in a tight bun. She smiled, and I smiled back. After a few minutes she said in perfect English, "You are far from home." I said, "Yes, I'm traveling." She said, "Why did you come here?" I told her I wanted to see the countryside and experience traditional Japan. She nodded slowly and said, "Be careful. Some places don't want to be found." I thought it was just cultural advice, so I said, "I'll be respectful." She said, "It's not about respect. It's about whether they want you there. Some places exist between things, between time, between worlds. If you're not careful, you might end up somewhere you can't leave. I didn't know how to respond. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, I've been riding this train for a very long time. I asked where she was going. She said, nowhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just riding. I asked if she lived nearby. She said, I used to. I lived in the village you're going to before the war, before everything changed. She looked out the window. They're all gone now. Everyone I knew, everyone who remembers me. They're all gone. But I'm still here, still riding this train. I asked which war she meant. She said, the big one, the one that changed everything. 1945. That was World War II. Over 70 years ago. She had to be in her 90s, but she looked maybe 60. I said, you must have been very young during the war. She turned to me and said, I was 22 when I died. The train began to slow. She said, this is your stop. You should get off now. I stood up, grabbed my bag. She said, one more thing. When you get to the village, if people seem strange, if they don't quite look at you right, if they speak but their mouths don't match the words, leave immediately. Don't stay the night. The train stopped. I got off. I turned around to wave goodbye, but the car she'd been in was completely empty. I ended up leaving that village after only an hour. She was right. People didn't look at me right. And I had this overwhelming feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. My grandmother told me this story before she died, and I think about it all the time. When she was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, she got separated from her parents at a county fair. She wandered around crying, trying to find them. A woman approached her, young, maybe in her 20s, wearing a dress that looked old-fashioned even for that era. The woman knelt down and said, "Are you lost?" My grandmother nodded. The woman said, "I can help you find your parents, but first, can you tell me what year it is?" Strange question, but my grandmother told her. The woman's face went pale. She said, "That can't be right, that's not possible." My grandmother said, "That's what my teacher told us." The woman said, "I need you to do something for me. Tell me, do I look real?" My grandmother didn't understand. The woman took her hand and said, "Can you feel my hand? Is it warm? Is it solid?" My grandmother said yes. The woman started crying. Thank God, I thought I was gone. I thought I had disappeared. The woman walked her around the fair looking for her parents. The whole time she kept muttering, "I'm still here. I'm still solid. I still exist." They found my grandmother's parents. The woman quickly said goodbye and walked away. But my grandmother said her mother looked terrified when she saw the woman. She grabbed her and said, "Did that woman touch you? Did she say anything to you?" My grandmother told her everything. Her mother said, "We need to leave now." In the car, my grandmother asked why. Her mother said, "If you ever see that woman again, don't talk to her. Don't let her touch you. Just run." My grandmother asked why again. Her mother said, "Because that woman is my sister, and she died 20 years ago." I used to work as a cashier at a convenience store on the night shift. This happened about 5 years ago. It was around 4 in the morning. I was the only person in the store when this woman walked in. Late 20s, business casual clothes, like she'd just gotten off work. She browsed for a few minutes and came to the counter with a bottle of water. I rang her up. She paid with exact change. As she was leaving, she stopped and said, "Can I ask you something weird?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong place? Like you took a wrong turn somewhere and ended up in a life that wasn't meant for you?" I said, "Yeah, sometimes." She said, "What if it's not just a feeling? What if it actually happened? What if there was a moment where everything split and you went one way, but you were supposed to go another?" I didn't know how to respond. She said, "I think I made a wrong turn. I think I was supposed to die 3 years ago. There was a car accident. I should have been in the car, but at the last minute I stayed home. My friend went without me. She died. I lived, but I don't think I was supposed to." I said I was sorry for her loss. She said, "No, you don't understand. Ever since that day, things have been wrong, like I'm out of sync. People forget me within minutes. Photos of me come out blurry, or I'm not in them at all. I feel like I'm fading." I asked if she'd talked to anyone about it. She said, "Who would believe me? You probably don't believe me." I said, "I don't know what to believe." She said, "That's fair." Then she said, "Thank you for listening," and walked out. I watched her on the security monitor as she crossed the parking lot, but she didn't get into a car. She just walked past all the cars and kept going into the darkness. I went outside to see where she went, but she was gone. The next day I checked the footage. It showed me standing at the counter, talking to nobody, a full conversation with empty air. The bottle of water she bought was still on the counter, but the footage never showed anyone coming in or leaving. I still have no explanation. I was working the late shift at a hospital as a janitor. Around 3 in the morning, I was cleaning the hallways on the 4th floor. It was the old wing of the hospital, mostly empty rooms waiting to be renovated. I was mopping near the elevator when I heard it ding, and the doors slid open. A woman stepped out wearing a hospital gown and those non-slip socks they give patients. She looked maybe 30 years old, long dark hair hanging over most of her face. I said, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help getting back to your room?" She stopped walking and slowly turned her head toward me. Not her body, just her head. And it turned way farther than it should have been able to, almost all the way around. She said in this flat, emotionless voice, "Where am I?" My stomach dropped, but I tried to stay calm. I said, "You're at Memorial Hospital, 4th floor." She tilted her head the other direction and said, "What year is it?" I said, "It's 2018. And she said, "That's wrong. I was just here. It was 2010. I had surgery. I woke up and everyone was gone." I started backing away slowly. I said, "Let me get a nurse for you." And she said, "No nurses. The nurses can't see me. I've been walking these halls for hours and nobody sees me. Nobody hears me, except you." I said, "I see you. I hear you." She took a step closer and said, "Then tell me, am I real?" She lifted her hands, and I saw hospital bracelets on her wrists. But the bracelets were old, yellowed and frayed, like they'd been there for years. She said, "I can't remember my name. I can't remember what I look like. I know I came here for surgery, but I don't remember leaving. I don't remember anything after going under." I tried to call the front desk, but my phone had no signal. She kept walking toward me and said, "Please, you have to tell me what happened to me. I need to know if I'm still alive." I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I went straight to the security office and told them what I saw. They checked the cameras, and there was no one on the 4th floor except me. They said I must have been tired seeing things, but I know what I saw. I quit 2 days later. Before I left, I looked up the hospital records from 2010. A woman matching her description had died during surgery on the 4th floor. Complications from anesthesia. They tried to revive her, but couldn't. Her name was Sarah. I never went back to that hospital. My uncle works as a long-haul trucker, and he told me about something that happened to him in Arizona. He was driving through the desert at night on a route he'd taken hundreds of times. It was around 1 in the morning, and he hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. Suddenly, his CB radio crackled to life, and a voice said, "Driver in the red Kenworth, do you copy?" My uncle was confused because his truck was red, but nobody should have known that unless they could see him. He picked up the radio and said, "Yeah, I copy. Who is this?" And the voice said, "I need you to pull over at the next mile marker. It's important." My uncle said, "Who are you? How do you know what truck I'm driving?" The voice replied, "Please, just pull over. It'll only take a minute." Something in him said he should just keep driving, but curiosity got the better of him. He pulled over at the next mile marker and waited. He looked around, but there were no other vehicles, no lights, nothing, just empty desert. Then his passenger door opened by itself, and he heard someone climb into the cab, but he couldn't see anyone. The voice said, "Thank you for stopping. I've been trying to get someone's attention for a very long time." My uncle said, "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" And the voice said, "I'm sorry for frightening you. I don't have much time. They're going to notice I'm gone. I need you to deliver a message." My uncle said, "I'm not delivering anything. Tell me who you are or get out." The voice said, "My name is Marcus Williams. I died on this highway in 1987. I was hitchhiking, and someone picked me up and killed me. My body is buried about 2 miles from here. My family never knew what happened to me. They think I just disappeared." My uncle's hands were shaking. He said, "This isn't funny." And the voice said, "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you the truth. I've been stuck here for over 30 years trying to get someone to hear me. You're the first person who has." There was silence for a moment. Then the voice said, "Please, tell them where I am. Tell them I didn't abandon them. Tell them I wanted to come home." My uncle said, "How do I find your family?" And the voice said, "My mother's name is Ruth Williams. She lived in Flagstaff. I don't know if she's still alive, but please try." Then the passenger door opened again, and the voice said, "Thank you. And I'm sorry for scaring you." My uncle sat there for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. When he finally started driving again, he called the police from the next truck stop and told them about the message. They were skeptical, but they sent someone to check the area 2 miles from where he'd pulled over. Sure enough, they found remains buried in a shallow grave. They identified them as Marcus Williams, a man who'd gone missing in 1987. My uncle helped them contact the family. Ruth had passed away 5 years earlier, but Marcus's sister was still alive. She said their mother had died, never knowing what happened to her son. My uncle said that was the last time he ever answered a random CB call.